And so we will get into the business of the day. We will be working on legislation that we have previously heard. We will begin with House Bill 2477. I will not give an overview. It's something we have looked at multiple times. The reviser does have a handout for the committee, and what this handout is, these are the amendments, or just one amendment that was adopted by the committee. So this is how the bill stands today, House Bill 2477, with the amendments. At this point, you can see on page 1, the 1,000s changed to 2,000, and then the report is to go to the Agriculture Committee or successor committee on the Senate and on the House side. So that's where we are on House Bill 2477. I do know that we have an additional amendment that will be offered, and so I will turn the floor over to Senator Francisco to mention her amendment. She did provide us with some pretty good information to make life as simple as possible for us. But Senator Francisco. Senator Francisco, you wish to explain the amendment and the handouts for the committee, please?
I would, and I've left some copies of the handouts on the desk for others. So House Bill 2477 provides actually 2 sets of instructions for how to do the reimbursements per site. And that I've shown on the piece that has the yellow at the top. And Grain and Feed and Randy Stuckey helped give us some information about how they were actually making the reimbursements. But so right now the bill calls for 90% of total eligible corrective actions greater than 1,000 up to 100,000 and 80%. But it also says that the total amount reimbursed for any one site shall not exceed 200,000. So I think they had been looking at that as an opportunity to really try to get some of these sites cleaned up, and we're actually working sort of backwards from that number. So I was able to talk a bit with Randy after our meeting Thursday, and then got certainly very good help from our reviser, Tamara. So this amendment looks pretty complicated, and it's hard to read as written. So I've just typed up what I'm suggesting, what this amendment would do in terms of the wording, and I did send that both to Tamara and to our representative from Grain and Feed. So they've had a chance to look at this. So what this would do would just allow an individual to receive reimbursement up to 300,000, which is what the request had been. And if an eligible person has paid at least 2,000, and Mr. Chair, I think that's the number that you were wanting to see, for eligible correction actions costs at a site, they can receive reimbursement in an amount equal to 90% until they've received 100,000. So they would have more corrective actions than that 100,000, but 100,000 represents getting 90% back. And they could get additional reimbursement in amount equal to 80% until they've received 200,000. And I think this just makes it more clear in the statute about what the intent was, and I would stand for any questions.
Committee, go ahead, if you would, Senator Francisco, and make your motion on the amendment.
I move my amendment.
You move to amend House Bill 24.
I'm-
Okay, and seconded by Senator Ware. Now, you have heard the explanation committee discussion on the amendment that we have been presented with. Senator Fagg.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I wanted to commend Senator Francisco for being very cost efficient. I noticed this little note she gave us is on, that was some used paper. And so I'm just saying thank you.
Okay, it's used on one side, now it's used on both sides, Senator Fagg. Okay. I don't see any discussion on the proposed amendment, but it does make it easier to read when the maker of the amendment has put together the wording and then an example. So I see no further discussion. Senator Francisco, you wish to close, move your amendment?
I've already moved my amendment, but I'm happy to close by saying we try to use only paper in our office that's already been printed on, because it turns out there's enough in this building to get through.
Okay, you've heard the motion to amend House Bill 2477 with the amendment as presented. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries. Committee, any further amendments, or what is your wishes with House Bill 2477 as amended? Senator Francisco.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would make an amendment, move that the committee recommend House Bill 2477 as amended. Favorably for action.
There is a motion to pass the bill out favorably as amended. Is there a second? Second by Senator, we'll go with Kirshen. Discussion on the motion. Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries. All right, that has dispensed with 2477 in committee. Now it will head to the floor of the Senate. The next item that we have on the agenda, committee, is working of House Bill 2634. I will let you find 2634 in your folder so you can look at any notes that you may have had. So I trust everyone has found the legislation, 2634. And just as a reminder of the legislation, we will have a brief overview from our reviser, Tamara Lawrence.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. House Bill 2634 would amend the statutes that provide for the designation of an IGUCA and the statute that provides for a LIMA. And this bill would provide an additional corrective control provision that would allow flexibility in the use of water rights, including but not limited to multi-year allocations and use in excess of a water rights annual authorized quantity in any given year, so long as the overall use of water is reduced during the term. And that could be added to the management plan for the IGUCA or the LIMA, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Questions of our reviser committee? Seeing none, thank you. I did not personally have any issue with House Bill 2634, but if the committee wishes to amend it, that is fine. We'll certainly discuss that. If there are no amendments, and unless someone thinks it is somewhat controversial, I have no problem with it being put on the consent calendar. But I will leave that to the will of the committee. Committee, what's your wishes on 2634? Senator Francisco.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would be happy to make a motion that the committee recommend House Bill 2634 favorably and put it on the consent calendar so we don't have to explain LIMAs and IGUCAs.
There is a motion by Francisco. Is there a second? Seconded by Senator Ware. And so the motion is to pass 2634 favorably and place on the consent calendar. Discussion on the motion. Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries. And our next item on the agenda is looking at House Bill 2525. And again, I will give you a few moments to pull your file and look at any notes that you may have made during the committee hearing. To begin with, we will receive a brief overview of House Bill 2525 from our reviser, Reviser Lawrence.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. House Bill 2525 would require the Secretary of Health and Environment to adopt rules and regulations to establish fees for permitting, monitoring, testing, inspecting, and regulating underground injection control Class 1 and Class 5 wells. The bill would also credit certain fees collected from water well contractors, the certification of operators of water supply systems and wastewater treatment facilities to the Water Program Management Fund instead of the State General Fund, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Questions of our reviser committee? Seeing none, thank you. Committee, what is your wishes regarding House Bill 2525? Motion by McGinn to move out favorably, correct? Seconded by Senator Francisco. Discussion on the motion. Seeing, did you have discussion? Okay, Senator Francisco.
Thank you. I'm not sure this is appropriate for consent agenda, but we have not made any amendments. So I would ask the maker of the motion if she has any comments on that.
I always like to have items on the consent calendar as chair. I don't have any controversy here, but we'll see what the committee wants to do. I just figure it would probably be pulled off of the consent calendar. But Senator McGinn. All right. Senator Francisco?
Thank you, that's fine, and especially as there are fees, that's something that people like to think about.
And discuss, sometimes at length. Okay. Further discussion on the motion to pass out favorably? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries. We'll go ahead and get into one more bill. We're moving quickly, which is fine by the chair. I did have a couple more listed, but one will take some time, and I do know there are some amendments on it. But next, we will look at House Bill 2543. $2543 has to do with livestock brands, but I'll let you find your folder, and again, any notes that you may have made. And we will receive an overview from our reviser on House Bill 2543.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. House Bill 2543 would authorize the Animal Health Commissioner to assess a separate application fee in addition to the existing registration fee. The application fee, registration fee, and renewal fee could not exceed $100. That's the gist of the bill. Thank you.
Okay, questions of our reviser about the bill as it stands? Senator Francisco.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So my understanding is, as it stands, the $100 is the limit for each of the applications.
Lawrence?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So if you look on page 2, it states that in no case, this is kind of starting around line 20, in no case shall the brand application fee, registration fee, or the renewal fee exceed $100.
Senator Francisco, additional questions?
I don't have any more questions. I did ask for an amendment.
All right. Did you have an mentioned too or not? Okay, do you have Francisco's amendment? Okay. I had also asked for an amendment, but we will start, because it is downstairs on the printer, I was just informed, we shall start with Senator Francisco, so. And these may overlap, we will find out, but Senator Francisco, do you have a balloon from the revisor to hand out, or? Oh, that's what's on, okay. I know we do not have it, but in the interest of time, which we've got plenty, we'll go ahead and start the discussion on your amendment, and then when we receive the actual amendment, we'll take a look at the wording.
And if you'd like to start with yours, that would be fine, but the amendment that I asked for did several things in this bill. It talked about a deadline for an individual coming back to the department after 75 days after they've sent out a notice. So instead of understanding when the receipt would be, it gave a time in terms of dates after sending out the notice. We talked about the case where an individual may not want to or is not able to make an application for renewal of a brand. So the wording would be, and see, I thought I'd have this amendment in front of me. So if the individual, oh, I can pick it up, wants to request a brand, then they shall follow the department's requirements. And then the other thing that it changes was talk about all those fees having one amount. The $100 would cover all three of the fees because I'm using an and instead of an or. I think that there's probably should be some more discussion on what that number should be if it's all three of the fees. You know, we talked about $5 for just finding out if a brand is there. They thought they may need $70 for the renewal. And I do want to make sure that there is enough funding for the department to work with the Attorney General and with protection of that brand. I think we just heard there's more cattle rustling lately.
So if I'm following correctly, and we shall see it momentarily, the first that you mentioned, Senator Francisco, would be on page 1, and correct me if I'm not in the right location. Page 1, lines 19-20. Is that correct? That's where the registrant shall, within 60 days of receiving notice. You had, well, we'll just sort of stand at ease until we get the wording. It's a little difficult to discuss something when we don't have it in front of us.
Well, it does on page, or on line 20, page 1, line 20, it would change the number 60 to 75, and then it would say the registrant shall within 75 days of notice of such determination being sent by the Animal Health Commissioner. So that turns around. We don't have to figure out if they received it. And I'm not stuck on any number of days. I just thought I would add those 15 days to get them mailed.
That was an amendment that I had as well. It was just not 75, it was 60, but I don't care if it's 60 or 75, but.
Mr. Chair, I would happy to leave that at 60 if that should be enough time because you have 2 months.
Receive the amendment, we can better engage in conversation. The amendment has arrived, so we will have that distributed. All right, Senator Francisco, now that we have the amendment in front of us, you have explained on page 1 the 75 days, and this is after being sent by the Animal Health Commissioner. And then at the bottom of page 1, each person holding, you strike holding and put wanting to renew. And then it would read a certificate of brand title, then you would insert held by such person, shall upon expiration. So you feel that covers what I had brought up about someone who does not want to renew, moves, dies, something like that?
I do, Mr. Chair. I thought that was a good comment that you made during our discussion, because this clearly says it's, if you want to renew, then here's what you shall do. So I think that the department was much more comfortable than saying that they may, remit a renewal fee. If they want to renew, they shall admit a renewal, remit in a renewal.
And then further down on page 2, committee, you will see the words added between the and brand, the total of the brand application fee, registration fee, and renewal fee. But it starts off with, in no case shall it exceed $100. So this is, as Senator Francisco had said, a combination. So I'm going to ask you to go ahead and make your motion, see if we get a second, and then we will further discuss the amendment as presented. Senator Francisco.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move these amendments to House Bill 2543 as presented.
Is there a second to the motion? Seconded by Senator Kirshen. Discussion on the motion, committee, on the amendment as presented. Senator Dahl.
On page 2, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Page 2, line 9, does that affect that 60 days grace period?
Senator Francisco, do you have an answer for Senator Dahl?
I would ask the revisor, so this, and I think that's a good catch, upon determination that such brand is available, may remit a brand registration fee.
Revisor Lawrence, you wish to assist?
This next one is expires, so it may be different.
It's my understanding that on page 2 in subsection D, that is talking about a renewal period. You have 60 days after your brand expires to renew, whereas the change on page 1, I believe, applies to the initial registration of the brand. But if the,
I agree.
both could be it.
So it would appear, Senator Dahl, that these are two separate issues. Further questions, Senator Dahl?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This can be confusing because the 60 to 60 kind of matched up. 60, 75, I just try to keep it simple, but whatever you guys want, that's cool.
Senator Dahl, I understand what you're saying, and it does make it simpler. Senator Francisco.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have no objection to that, so if the the person who seconded the motion would also agree, that's a friendly change to our amendment, and
So your change, Senator Francisco, would be on page 1, rather than it being 75, it would stay with the 60 days, so we would not include that change, but the rest of the amendment would stay. Is that correct?
that is correct.
Okay. Thank you, and that was all right with the second. So our committee, on your amendment, on page 1, the 75 is not being offered as a change. It remains at the 60 days, but the rest of the amendment is being proposed. Further questions, discussion on the proposed amendment? Senator Ware.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, this seems like a good idea. It gives a firm date instead of a vague date in both cases. And we haven't talked about what the amount will be, but I like the idea that it's a specific dollar amount on the application fees, all of them together, so that it gives something specific for the folks working with the brands to know how much it's going to cost them, or maximum at least.
Further questions, discussion? Senator Francisco, you may close on your amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I believe this addresses some of the concerns that were mentioned during the hearing. I move the amendments proposed for House Bill 2543, except for the change from 75 to 60 as presented.
You have heard the motion, committee. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries. And committee, I had mentioned, but because of the fact that it was in addition to the things that Senator Francisco had brought, we do not have a balloon, but I had asked during the committee hearing, as you will remember, on line 32, the last few words into lines 33, shall be unlawful. And so I asked, okay, well, what's the penalty? And so the amendment, and you do not have one, if you prefer to have a balloon in front of you, we can delay and wait, but the reviser had looked, and that would be KSA 47-421. So what the insertion would be, just that one location, right? Pardon me. Okay, and I think there possibly shall be another location. What about in line 11 on the back? Okay. So the insertion would be after the word lawful and subject to penalties provided in KSA 47-421, which sort of goes without saying, but I prefer to specify so we know what the penalty is. And so I would make a motion that we insert the language there, and then also on the back on line 11, correct? Revisor, okay. At the, after the word unlawful and subject to penalties provided in KSA 47-421. And so I trust that's clear, but again, committee, if you need a balloon, we can get that. But so I'm going to make a motion that we add those words on line 33, page 1, and on line 11, page 2. Again, the words are, and subject to penalties as provided in KSA 47-421. So there is a motion seconded by Senator Fagg. Is there questions? Are you clear on what the intent is? Just to say this is the penalty. It's unlawful and this is the penalty. Discussion on the motion. Senator Francisco.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. One, because you brought it up earlier during our hearing, and because it seems to be fairly clear in terms of the word you're adding, I have no objection to making that amendment and asking the reviser to have any technical leeway.
Further comments, questions, discussion on the conceptual amendment? Seeing none, we will vote. All in favor of the amendment, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries. I had nothing further, but does any other committee member, Senator Ware?
Well, no, not on that, of course, but the idea of the total cap, as much as that makes sense, I guess I really want, I'd like some guidance if I know it's usually our deliberation at this point, but from the department as to what's workable for them, because this is kind of a new idea that just popped up. Don't want to make a problem that we could avoid.
I appreciate that, Senator Francisco. During our committee discussion, the question was asked for the presentation. I don't know, well, I guess it would be in the department's testimony if you will look at the department's testimony, but the current fee is $55. And they said that their intent would be to have the new fee set at $70. And then they would have an application fee on top of that. They said $5. So we're at $75. So my point, my understanding, and if we learn after the fact, we can consider an amendment on the floor. But I guess my thought, Senator Ware, is the $100 is still more than sufficient to cover what the department had indicated in their testimony and in our discussion. Senator Ware.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Would it be out of order to check with the department at this point, or?
It's always in order for you to go talk to them.
I see.
But the chair does not allow, when the committee's deliberating,
Yeah,
for
okay.
agencies to come back to the microphone. Seeing no further discussion, we shall vote. Oh, no, we don't have a motion, do we? So what's the committee's wishes regarding House Bill 2543? Senator Fagg.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move that we take HB 2543 and move it out of committee favorably as amended.
There's a motion by Senator Fagg, seconded by, are you seconding? Okay. Okay, Senator Kirshen is seconding. Now, discussion on the motion, Senator Francisco.
I'm trying to remember if we voted on your amendment.
Yes.
Yes, okay.
Further discussion on the motion to pass out favorably. Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries. So that dispenses with House Bill 2543. That will conclude our business for the day, but committee, our next item up, which I don't know if we will get to it tomorrow or not because we do have a committee hearing, a bill hearing, but 2607 will be the next bill up, and I hadn't looked to see what else may come up because I didn't know we would get this far, honestly, this morning, but we did. And so is there anything additional for the benefit of the committee? I have nothing further. With that, we are